The moment the human voice enters a piece of music, everything starts to feel bigger, more emotional, more alive. CHOOIR, the latest title in the Symphonic Elements ecosystem, captures that feeling instantly. These massive cinematic sounds come directly from the orchestral library of Hans Zimmer. And like other Symphonic Elements titles, we can push them beyond the traditional sound of the choir to dark and electronic sound design, and even modern trap production. Let's explore how easy it is to use CHOOIR to take simple ideas and transform them into massive cinematic moments. Okay, so in that first piece, I've used mostly traditional choir sounds, but you'll hear even in this first chord, there's quite a lot of nuance in that preset, which gives a bit of an uneasy feeling, which is really cool. But keep that in mind, we're going to come back to that. I want to show you just some of the basic sounds of choir because we actually have a couple different types of choirs to choose from, like a boys' choir. Female voices only, and you'll notice that we have O and Ah articulations that we can choose from. And of course, a mix of male and female voices. And not only have you seen me direct the intensity of these voices, but we can also conduct and crossfade between the low and high sections of the choir. Now, so far I've been showing you these kind of basic sustained tones, but in this piece you might have heard the chants and shouts, which I think sound fantastic. So if I use a shout that accents these downbeats, but then also utilize an accent on the offbeat, it gives this amazingly authentic sound. We can also add to these with more sustained notes in the additions, or the additional shouts and chants to make it even more intense. Crescendos help to build intensity as well. It's great that these are just presets and they're sounding fantastic right away. I don't have to do any intense nitty-gritty sound design. So in the context of the piece, that really helps to build momentum towards this ending. On that note, some of the nuanced sounds like I showed in the beginning, like this bendy cluster, which maintains its authentic sound. It sounds like a real performance because it's captured from a real, authentic performance. You would normally have to take hours spending time doing automation to do this digitally, but we've got it right here in a preset and we can make it as intense or as subtle as we want. So users of the other Symphonic Elements titles will be right at home with this interface, but I just wanted to point out that while I've based this piece mostly on CHOOIR, so this is just all the voices soloed, CHOOIR is this perfect complement to the remaining Symphonic Elements titles, which I have down here in this group, and I'm using the other titles, strings, drums, brass, and percs, to make the remaining orchestral composition. But without the CHOOIR, sounds just so much less intense. Let's play that back with everything together. They really come together to make this really full, filled out ensemble. Now let's jump over to something completely different. I'll show you choirs in a beat-making context. Now in this beat, everything besides the drum and the 808 is actually choir. So I'll solo the choir group. Some of it's very clearly vocally driven, but others we've sort of pushed this plugin beyond the traditional choir sound for sure. In this first sound, you can clearly hear the voice, but it's processed through a finisher here, the reversinator. And if I pull that finisher back, we'll start to get back to more of the traditional choir roots. But pushing it up gives us that chopped sample vibe, which I think is perfect for the backing of this beat here. This preset here, which is called Vatican Dust, transforms the voice material into a kind of vintage pad sounding synth, which is, we're helping that vintage sound with this back to 1900 finisher effect. There are lots of different finisher effects, ones that affect the character, so usually we can use these to kind of get a more lo-fi or gritty sound, and I really like using them here. There's also delay, movement, and tone effects, but we've got that in addition to the character effects, so we've got a low pass filter here, delays, and we can affect the low and high choirs independently. Doing something like automating these and creating movement over time. Here, let's solo this one. You can see I've just automated the finisher just to dial that grit in and out. And that concept of automating the finisher is something that I ended up really liking with choir, and I've done it across a number of tracks. But finally, let me show you this synth here, which I don't think it would be easy to even recognize that this came from a choir sample library until we get little hints of those voices. So you can see right away here, I've automated the finisher once again, this time using the fragments finisher. And I think it's great to go from this chopped, gated synth sound to letting that voice peek through. And I think part of the beauty here is that if I tried to reverse engineer what this sound was in a production, I would probably start with a synth, combine it with a choir, and have to do tons of automation and sound design work. But here, it's just everything is built right into the plugin. I can emphasize those high-end frequencies with the highlighter. I can even add a bit of reverb here as well. Push it into the fragments when I need that more synth sound. And not to mention here on the character effects, we're getting sort of a radio quality to the sound, which I can pull back on or make even more aggressive. And again, automating that finisher to bring those voices in and swell. It has an advanced sound design sound to it, but it was made really easy by utilizing just what's built into choir. To me, I think it's pretty impressive that these 4 layers of choir make up the entirety of the beat. You might expect this to be synths and samples, but no, we've got full control, just 4 layers of choir against a drill 808 and drum beat, and choir's really providing that dark, ethereal tone that makes the full character of this beat. Next, I've got one more scoring example. This one leans a little bit more electronic and industrial. Not unlike the drill beat we just heard, this track utilizes some of the more non-traditional presets in the pad, motion, and atmosphere preset categories of CHOOIR. So even this first sound, you remember we talked about automating that finisher, but if I just take this first sound and push that broken capacitor, get that really broken capacitor sound, coupled with a tape echo, which will certainly help us with a little bit of a lo-fi tape vibe. And just that brokenness going through the delay sounds really nice. Makes for a nice little pad here, but I do want to isolate the beginning and just solo the more ethereal parts of the CHOOIR only, and just point out how easy it is to make a really ethereal atmospheric soundscape with only CHOOIR. Let's hone in on this sound right here because it once again straddles the line between CHOOIR and synth sound almost, right? And we've basically touched on this, but I'll just show it in our actual automation view in the DAW here. But just automating a few key parameters, for instance here on the Lost in Space preset, which is a pad preset. We've got our gate for motion, our parallel distortion, so we're getting that gritty sound without totally destroying the sound or totally distorting the sound, and then we've got an additional super lo-fi amongst all these other effects, right? But in a really simple way, I'm able to just automate those key effects down here in Ableton Live. Didn't even have to configure anything, they just appear right here in this configure menu, and that is what ends up making your tracks even more dynamic, because you can write these beautiful CHOOIR or synth lines, but if the sound evolves over time, not just musically, but through the actual sound design, it makes the composition sound much more advanced. And the fact that I don't need to use 4 different plugins to add parallel distortion, do some gating, create this kind of distorted lo-fi effect, it saves so much time, and it helps you just create that very advanced sound. So across many of these CHOOIR presets, you're going to see that there's not many that I didn't either automate just the finisher or automate multiple parameters to achieve the sound that I got. And with the first piece, we of course mentioned the chants, but I especially like the whispers and shouts preset here because it gives that sort of mystical, spooky, and to me it really adds a lot to the piece. And we are once again being accompanied by other Symphonic Elements titles like brass, strings, drums, and perks. Bring choirs in. And then a few samples to fill out that kind of cyberpunk industrial electronic sound. Another great example of pushing the CHOOIR into the electronic world is the Cathedral Basements preset, which utilizes the filter alterations finisher effect. Again, creating emotion, but also giving us that kind of glitchy, almost spaceship type sound, coupled with delay, taj, a telephone effect on the character, delays for both the lows and the highs. Letting that sound ring out and just totally degrade like that it's a beautiful sound, perfect for the electronic cyberpunk industrial vibe I wanted to create here. But Whether you're looking for that signature Hans Zimmer cinematic choir sound, or you're looking to branch out into something more experimental, Symphonic Elements Choir is incredibly inspiring to work with. It can bring scale and emotion to an orchestral arrangement, but it can also become texture and atmosphere. More than anything, it adds that human element which makes the music feel alive. Find out more about CHOIR in the links down below. This has been Tetro here with UJAM. Have a good one.